Okay, so moving on to the next question. This one is from Mudos Explorer. Could
Yeah.
you tell us more about
Nice handle.
the yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The schism that happened between the Mudokons and the Gluckons.
It's one of those things that I hesitate on because we've explored a number of different possibilities. And I know, anything I say can be held to me if we change that slightly. So, given that license and that excuse first, um, I think there's a very interesting history with history of our own world, especially when you get into the mythologies of lost lands. Atlantis. I'm going to mention a couple more that some on this chat may know. I suspect. So you go Atlantis before Atlantis, Lemuria. Before Lemuria um, was Mu, and these are like supposedly previous whole entire civilization epics that took place in the history of our world. And then as one goes to the dustbin of history, eventually it's just erased. And then they say, no, we began here. But there's possibly way deeper knowledge. Like, for example, when I went to school, we were absolutely told that civilization is only really 4,000 years old. Before that, it was people building, if they had any huts at all, they were made out of mammoth bones and leather skins. And then right after that, they just started making pyramids, right? And I just always thought that was the most ridiculous leap. And so I got really into ancient archaeology, not going out in the field, but just researching. And today we have cities that are being found in Turkey, like Göbekli Tepe, which is now proven to be 14,000 plus years old, right? That's not supposed to be there. The Sphinx is arguably 14,000 plus years old. It's not supposed to be there. It doesn't align with what the Smithsonian, the British Museum of History, the Smithsonian Museum, the authoritative universities and stuff that claim to be experts in archaeology. They just say, oh, that's all nonsense. Don't pay attention to that. Just pay attention to this. They went from building tents made out of bone to pyramids because that holds, pyramids. They didn't invent the arch yet, so everything had to be in pyramid shape so they wouldn't fall over. So you have these answers that are just really convenient to institutions, but they're just a substantial degree of analysis just kind of breaks it apart. So I'm one who's very skeptical of history, what we're taught versus what possibly happened. They rarely are recorded. What happened is rarely recorded accurately. And so I'm not one of those people who believes that, oh, eventually all truths in history get discovered. Like, I don't believe that at all. I think there's way more bodies of truth in the graveyard than there are the mysteries that we've solved, so to speak. But trying to sum that up, the Mudokons, if we go back to the tale of Atlantis, what they claim was that Atlantis had learned how to tap into something. There was a natural harmonic force on this planet. It related around gravity and frequency and iron and magnetics and things like this. And they were able to create a device that was sort of channeling planetary energy that then led to the earthquakes that then sunk their island. Right. That's the popular myth of it. And if you watch the series Lost, there was in the later episodes on the island in the series, they would start finding basically this pre-Atlantean technology. And when they started like turning it on or something, this is the whole reason for the research center being on the island. When they turn it on, they couldn't turn it off, and it would just keep on accelerating into something terrifying in terms of power, because it was like channeling the power of the planet. And so for the Mudokons, the idea in their history was that they had a pretty well balanced civilization, but they were tapping into deeper and deeper energies. And with energy is almost always the most sought after thing that a nation has or pursues. Like, if you go, what's the deepest clearance in military sectors? It's always around energy. So you go, well, nuclear is highest clearance, right? And the reason is, we're just, everything we do is based off energy. So the Mudokons got off track and tapped into something very powerful. And I know we've talked about it different times, different angles on this story, but the one defining ultimate moment would be they fucked up and they created something that created really negative results. And um, as a result, they lost themselves in the power structure, and they sort of resorted themselves almost back to caveman, because it was kind of like if an I'm sorry, EMP weapon, electromagnetic pulse, whether from a star, from a sun flare, or from a weapon, hit the planet in a major way today, in not too long, we'd be close to Stone Age again, because everything that relied on our power source, electricity, would be fried. So I don't mean this as a big global singular statement, but in general, there's a lot of scientists that would support that conclusion. And then there's all kinds of hypotheses off it. But in concept, you go, they tapped into something that they weren't mature enough and spiritually evolved enough to really handle. And the ones that were in control of the power were more like our political class today. They just weren't serving the needs of the wisest and the smartest. It would be like those that, like the keepers, these things that were older than that goes back before those accidents, and they held on to something really strong deep within themselves. It was an ancient knowledge. And so that's about the big chasm that was created, and that allowed others to evolve out. And in a land of scarcity, so what I would say a big difference here was when the Mudokons had that control and they were the superiors, they had abundance. And so they didn't have to have factory farms, they didn't have this, because if they, let's just say, if they were doing had a city and they were doing landscaping for that city, it would all be edible fruits, it would all be nuts and berries. It wouldn't just be pretty things to make companies look better, to make the street look nicer. It would be something everyone's walking around and it could just be eating food. So they had a different way of looking at it. And they lost that. And out of the scarcity, more brutal races emerged that were typically in swamps and damp conditions, would often be associated with parasites. And then we can tap into later. I think there's a question about the Vikers and trees. We can tap on that. But these would have been evolving out of parasitic races that typically didn't have a chance to thrive. But when the Mudokons screwed it up, and others, the Mudokons weren't alone in this. There was other races that were very similar, and they screwed it up. And then as a result, the power structure changed. They went back into a more primitive existence just out of necessity, because they shut down. They killed their own power at great expense. And now other species emerged, and they wanted the whole history of the Mudokons ever having this sort of superior position. They wanted that erased. So I hope that sheds light on it. That gets into the moon a little bit, but we've touched on that before.
Yep, that was an epic answer. Thank you very much for that.